Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley, founder and owner of GC Realty. Mark, how's it going over there?
Not bad. We are creeping up on our 200th episode. What are we going to do for this?
It is around the corner, no? By the time this airs, we'll be in the mid 180s, no?
Yeah, I think we'll land somewhere right around February. So we have to figure out, for 100th episode, we recorded a live episode and we had a big party, and that was an awesome time. And we have to think of something creative for the 200th. So maybe some of our listeners out there have an idea of maybe the type of party we could throw or a venue. And I don't know, we need to do something really cool this time. Not that the last time wasn't cool. We just need to do something that tops it. I didn't want to just have just a normal get together. So.
Well, if it comes in February, why don't we do this? Why don't we do it on Valentine's Day to really separate the true diehard listeners who are willing to leave their spouse or significant other to come hang out with two short bald dudes?
Yep.
So
I'm only partially balding, dude. Like it's not.
I threw you into the category. That was unfair.
I didn't give in yet. All right.
Fighting, no. You've always been a fighter.
Yeah. But yeah, no. Like we talked about maybe we do it some sort of party tied together for some sort of charity event or something like that. Like I don't know, anyone out there listening, if you got ideas or something cool we could do, we'd love to hear what you're thinking. Or if you got a cool place to host it. Obviously, we're not going to be hosting too much stuff outdoors in February, but any cool venues that you think we should look at, or about, or you work at. Yeah,
let us know. We're all ears. So. Mark, we got a great guest today, so let's go ahead and just jump in here. What's the housing provider tip of the week?
All right, housing provider tip of the week. Right now, it's mid-November. We have a lot of people, I know inside of our portfolio, that we're attempting to sell. I know there's a lot of flippers right now that may not be getting the price they want or the traction they want when it comes to trying to get offers that you might have been 6 months ago, and they're considering renting. So my tip today is a lot of times rehabbers, when you're going to flip, you're flipping it and you're doing certain things that attract a buyer. You're not taking certain rental things into consideration. Maybe it would be door stops, or it might be you're going to have to go do another couple $100 kind of cleaning before a tenant moves in, or you're going to have to maybe fix that garage door that you're planning on passing on to the buyer to deal with after you sold it to them. So keep it in mind, you might still have a short punch list or $1,000 worth of things if you're going to go from trying to sell to try to rent, especially door stops. Like if you just did a beautiful rehab, and more likely you put a bunch of door stops, and now you don't want that to get messed up because you probably want to sell your property in similar condition in a year or two when you think you could get the price you're looking for. So keep those things in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. We're actually going through that with one of the bungalows. We went through a little checklist on, okay, what has to happen if we do go down this path. The one other thing to piggyback is if you hired an agent to do the listing and you're going to rent it out yourself, you technically don't have rights to those photographs. Right. So you either got to go take your own photographs, get a photographer, but one way or another, like you do not own those photographs if you had a listing agent who took them and paid for them. So you can't just throw those up on Zillow as your rental, just as we'll give, I don't know if that's legal advice or just best practice advice, but
no, that's that you're just not allowed to do that. So, and a lot of times Zillow, so if you're going to take somebody's pictures off the internet, Zillow and all those other places, I don't know if it's an algorithm is the right word, but they will know that you've copied those or right click save those from another website, and they'll either not have your listing up there or they won't have your pictures up there. So just kind of keep in mind, there's things on the back end that will prevent you from using those, even when you think you're trying to use them.
Yeah. Well, cool. Let's jump in. All right. So today's guest, this is a heavy hitter, Mark. And we first want to thank Casey over at Chicago Cityscape. If you guys haven't listened to those episodes, we had Cityscape on at episode 112 and again at 169, both tremendous episodes with a ton of local insights, but he was generous enough to make this introduction to our guest today, who has over 30 years experience in the real estate investment space, with a focus on commercial real estate. Previously, she was the executive director of transactions for PGIM. That was a business unit within Prudential Financial. Also the co-leader of their national disposition program, where she oversaw the sale of more than 200 investment properties with a total value of more than $8.7 billion. We've thrown the billion word around a few times, but $8.7 billion, that's taking, 8 people who've done $1 billion and put them all together. The difference between 1 billion and 8 billion is a big number. It's $7 billion. Prior to that, she was responsible for sourcing more than $2.75 billion in real estate investment opportunities in the Midwest, covering all different property types, including office, retail, multifamily, hotel, industrial. Currently, she's the executive director of the Marshall Bennett Institute of Real Estate at Roosevelt University, She's also the first African-American woman leader of a higher education real estate program in the U.S. She sits on numerous boards, including the advisory board of our friends over at CIC. So without further ado, Collete English Dixon, welcome to the show. Collete,
Hey,
how are we doing today?
hey guys, how are you? Good to see you.
We are good. We're very excited to have you. We're very humbled to have you because you have a ton of knowledge to drop on our listeners here today. So
Hopefully, let's hope so.
yeah, we'll try to condense this into an hour, but 30 years of experience. We're not going to go through everything, obviously. Can you just give us, though, what attracted you to real estate? What was the tipping in point where you said, okay, this is something that I think I can make a career out of?
In all honesty, this is a space I just kind of fell into. I had no idea what real estate was about when I got my first job. It was just supposed to be a space holder before I went to law school. But I wound up really getting into it when I finally realized that this industry is like everything. And it is the office building, it's the shopping center you go to, it's the apartment you live in, it's where you work, it's where you play, it's all that stuff. I had no clue about that when I first started working at Pru. And once I started to realize that this was such a unique space, and when I joined the industry, it was on the cusp of some pretty significant changes that helped it grow to the mega trillions of dollars of an industry that it is now. So it was great opportunity, incredible timing, and really not even knowing what I was doing that kind of got me here.
It's the best way to get in.
Maybe. If you don't know what you don't know, you can't talk yourself out of it.
Yep.
So talk to us a little bit about just, you said it's evolved into this, trillion dollar industry. Talk to us a little about how deals were done, call it 20 years ago compared to how they are today, right? There's definitely a difference in just how transactions happened. Were things less competitive? Was it more competitive? Was it just institutional money? Was it just mom and pops? Talk to us about that landscape maybe 20, 25 years ago compared to today.
I think it's really fair to say that the institutional presence in the commercial real estate industry has absolutely exploded over the term of my career anyway. At the time I joined, there was no such thing as, the mega giant REIT, like an EQR or an EOP, or those guys didn't exist when I showed up. There was no Blackstone. There was no BlackRock. The most high profile real estate owners were like insurance companies, like Prudential was when I joined them, that happened to have some real estate investments as an alternative investment strategy. They were mostly lenders. They weren't really owners. So from that time when it was Metropolitan Life, it was Equitable, it was Prudential, it was Northwestern Mutual, those sort of folks that owned real estate mostly by accident, but also started to see there was some value to owning it rather than just being a lender to it. The industry just evolved from there. It became institutionalized. And with that institution came the investment management model, where you would raise money from other people, not just from your insurance premiums, to invest in things and to build buildings and to help, expand the built environment within some strategies that then led us into this incredibly mega-sized industry that we see right now with the likes of the BlackRocks and the Blackstones and, the EQRs and former EOPs and GGP, what's now Brookfield. I mean, these things are massive platforms that people didn't have 25, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So that transition has afforded a lot of opportunity for people. It has also, I think, kind of skewed the world's perception of what commercial real estate is. A lot of people, when they see it, think that's all it is. It's all as institutional ownership, it's mega REITs, it's investment pension funds, it's all that stuff. A lot of this industry is actually owned by moms and pops. Commercial real estate was a family business when it all started. We didn't call it commercial real estate. It was just you owned stuff, right? And it was a family business. It is still a lot of private ownership. It's still a lot of mom and pops who own, 4 flats somewhere, or they had an apartment building that they've had in the family for 40 years. I mean, that is still a meaningful part of this industry that most people don't really talk about very much.
Do you think so? My career's been for about 20 years, and I've watched like all those ones you rattled off that kind of followed grow, and so much money coming into the space. Like, you kind of alluded that it doesn't really affect the smaller landlords, but how do you think this has helped or hurt them, I guess, specifically?
Well, I don't say it doesn't affect them. It's just like, I don't think we think about them very much because we tend to be blinded by the shiny light, which is the big high profile deal, who owns the Willis Tower this year, or who's doing, some mega deal somewhere that everybody just looks at. I think what has happened is that for smaller owners, their competition for capital has probably changed a little bit. They may find themselves, no longer as in control of their market as they used to be. The guys who were just like neighborhood investors are now seeing institutions and larger players kind of creeping into their space, sometimes kind of changing the whole dynamic of what those markets look like, right? So if you owned 4 flats in, I don't know, Rogers Park at one point, and now you're seeing that there's actually someone coming in wanting to invest a lot of money in that market, it can change the market you're dealing with. It can change the expectations of your users. It can change, you've got to change with it too, which is sometimes not easy to do. So I don't think it's hurt them. I just think it has forced maybe a little bit of change. And it has probably made them kind of second guess, is this what they want to do forever? Because taxes go up, because values go up, because more capital is in a market. All those things can have a very significant impact on small portfolios.
So capital rolling into the market, how do you think that has affected, with all the institutional players coming in, you think that's helped or hurt even the small person as far as just people, lenders or institutions that are comfortable lending? Because that's blown up too on the side of the actual owners.
Yeah, I think that it makes it really a little bit harder sometimes for smaller owners to see where their capital can come from. More capital providers is always a good thing for a market, I think. Less is really a big problem. More is always a good thing, but it may make it harder for the smaller guys to kind of see where they really should engage. Should continue to go to a Wintrust to get our money? Or, should we start talking to the JP Morgans of the world? Probably not. It is just more information and more options that they need to consider that may make their lives more difficult, but may also provide them with access to funding that they never thought they could get, right? You can talk about interesting funding. Your friends at CIC, where I'm on the board at CIC, they are a neighborhood housing funder, fundamentally. That platform's been around for quite a while. It benefits from having institutional bank-led capital, as a partner. Because that helps give them more resources to engage with smaller owners. Those are good things. Those are all good things. But I do know that it just becomes just really confusing. It's just a lot of stuff. It's a lot of distractions. It's a lot of influences that sometimes smaller players just aren't prepared to deal with.
Yep. And we will hit on CIC. Before going there, though, let's circle back to, you did over, $8 billion in dispositions. That's a lot, right? So there are some, pretty big deals there for our listeners who, own a couple 3 flats, own a couple, smaller multifamilies that probably sold off a few things here or there. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk to, if you're doing one of those, a giant sale, some of the things that are different than the typical transaction that a lot of our smaller listeners are used to? Like, what are some things, whether it be cost-wise, the people involved, the time length, just provide a little bit of a background for someone who's not used to that big of a deal?
I think probably the biggest difference is the scale of liability. So if I'm selling, a 250 unit apartment building, and it's going to be, $100 million, let's just say, that would be a huge number, but whatever that's going to be. The amount of liability that you have to try to manage for what can happen after closing is so much more significant than if you're selling a 3 flat, right? Because the scale of what you're doing, the moving pieces that you might have missed, that someone would go, oh, wait a minute, you didn't tell me about those 10 security deposits that were missing. Oh, heck. Oh, wow. So you have to pay a lot of attention to the details on bigger deals. And there are a lot of details. So you have probably a much bigger team of people working for you too. So you've got a fairly significant law firm. You've got a ton of analysts who are scouring every piece of paper. You've got the professional property management firm that can do all sorts of forensic review of rent rolls and analysis of kind of your tenant profile and look into different government regulations that may have something to do with how you rent your building or all of that stuff. You have a whole cohort of experts that are part of your team. And that's just because the scale of the liability for having missed something is so much bigger. So that can be kind of worrisome, actually. Even if you do it really well, and if you actually prepare yourself for all of it, it is still so important to look at all those minutia details to avoid the risk. Timelines, timelines vary. I think sometimes institutional transactions happen a lot faster than smaller scale transactions, because usually we have the money in the bank. We don't have to go to the lenders a lot of times. So that makes it easier to write the check when you're ready to go, rather than waiting for the bank to go through its process and all of its maneuverings to get your money on the table. The marketing timeline may be shorter, depending upon the quality of your asset. A really good asset, you might be able to find a buyer in less than 30 days. Something that has a little hair on it might take you a little bit longer. Sometimes smaller assets, because they've got to hit that sweet spot of someone's money, may take a little bit longer to find a buyer. And then you have a somewhat longer transaction time. All of that can be very different in smaller deals.
Got it. Great answer. And when we're talking, let's say, $100 million type of deal, is this going out to like the Marcus and Millichaps of the world to advertise? Or is this something where it's like, hey, we know there's 5 buyers in the nation right now, we're just going to go directly to them?
In my role, where I was really a fiduciary on behalf of our pension fund clients, it was very rare for us to think we knew the 5 folks who would do it. Because of the increased number of people who have money in this country and in this world who want to invest in real estate, especially in the United States, you might be just a little crazy to think the only 5. I mean, it's just, there's always somebody new. So while I wouldn't always bring $100 million deal to a Marcus and Millichap, those deals tended to, at least during my life in the industry, tended to go to the JLLs and the CBREs and the eStills and the bigger platforms that seem to have more institutional capital connections. We would often do a broad marketing because you want to make sure you got the best deal. You had a chance to kind of look at the whole landscape of potential investors and buyers and hopefully found the 3 or 4 who were the best ones. And then you negotiate and kind of play the game between the 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. If finding that second potential buyer, right? When there's competition, all of a sudden everything changes, right? All of a sudden you have the leverage, and by getting that second buyer, whoever brought it to you, like they're worth their weight in gold.
Yeah. And hopefully I never have to go to the second buyer. I want the first one, but having a competition is always a good thing. It does put you in a better position as a seller, because you have some comfort that if the first one blows up, and sometimes that happens for some of the most unexplainable reasons. I mean, I wound up doing a lot of my dispositions around the time things were blowing up in 2007 and 2008. So, Bear Stearns blows up, my deal dies. And it's like, I got to find another buyer who doesn't care that Bear Stearns blew up. It's just, you have to be prepared for those sort of unexpected hiccups.
Can you, if you don't mind sharing, give us a crazy hiccup, right? If you're doing dispositions in 2007, like you had to have like a few sleepless nights here. If you don't mind sharing, share 1 or 2 that our listeners would find amusing. You can look back and laugh now, but at the time was not funny.
It was not funny. It was truly not funny. I was really in the position of trying to get some transactions done in Manhattan toward the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. And we had the Lehman Brothers hiccup in the middle of a transaction where suddenly it's like, I'm sorry, what happened to Lehman Brothers? What? How does that have to do with me? This is, I mean, they're not even a tenant of ours, but the sort of panic that put into the marketplace, our buyers like love the deal, but not really sure where this is going, because people were starting to sense something was happening in the market, but we weren't really sure what it was. And the Lehman Brothers blow up was one of those like, wow, we need to pay attention to this. What does this mean? And then go to the next spring, I had Bear Stearns blow up on me. I'm in the middle of another Manhattan office building sale. I'm like, really? What is this with Manhattan and like these financial services companies just blowing up? Honestly, I thought Manhattan was more resilient than that. And we proved that was just really telling us that we were in the midst of, a storm that nobody was really expecting. And it was, you had to sit back and go, so what does that mean? Should we try to continue down our path of our very, consistent discipline of dispositions, which on a scale of a portfolio that Prudential was managing at the time, we would regularly sell, $3 to $5 billion worth of real estate a year, because that's just the discipline of the portfolio strategy. When you see that that's not going to happen, you are kind of forced to sit back on your heels and go, what is that telling us? How are we going to accomplish our goals in the middle of what appears to be a financial meltdown? The conversations were pretty wild and crazy, but you wound up just having to revisit kind of your intent. Your intent's not to throw things away. Your intent's not fire sale just because the financial markets are going sideways. And you just wind up going, it'll be okay. We're just going to have to look at this differently. And maybe we're not going to sell very much this year. But when a buyer calls you and says, like your deal, but I don't know what this means. And so my investment committee is going, I can't do this. You kind of go, okay, fine. And if they're not going to do it, nobody else is either for the time being. So you just wind up having to wait. And that's okay. Patience is a good thing in this market.
So the pension you were working for, if you could kind of elaborate, you weren't doing all this disposition because you guys were just trying to get out of a certain asset class. You were doing it because you're buying probably on the other side X amount and then selling X amount every year as a strategy. Right.
Well, we had a broad range of portfolio strategies. We did everything from core, which is stabilize, buy at market, sell at market, operate kind of as is kind of stuff. We had a value add strategy, which could be where you bought something with an opportunity to redevelop it or re-tenant it, or even if you're developing new property, that could fall into a value add strategy. And then we had a little bit of an opportunistic strategy, which means you took a little more risk in return for a little more return. But in all of those, there was an anticipated timeline for how long you were going to own it, or at what point did you see yourself selling it to redeploy that capital to buy something else, or because you wanted to harvest the gain, which was always a large part of the portfolio strategies. So we did that all the time. I mean, and you would find that most institutional investors do have a discipline around their portfolio management, which includes a sell model in addition to their buying strategies. It's part of the whole asset management and portfolio management effort.
That's interesting. Did you have any?
Here's another thing I just want to say. There's always that question, though. Just because you have money, should you spend it? And just because people say you should sell it, should you? And don't count other people's money. So it's like, if you're actually making a ton of money on a transaction, the fact that somebody may flip it 6 months later and make more, that was the risk they took. You took the risk you took. And be happy with that. If you were happy with that transaction, don't second guess yourself. And don't ever just spend money because you have it. Always spend money because it's a good deal. And that's the kind of discipline that I think institutional investors have, and would definitely be a mindset that could be used by anybody who wants to be a real estate investor, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. Going back to the first point you made there, I feel a lot of our listeners are going through that on a much smaller scale, but they're looking at a 4-unit building. They're saying, oh, but this guy bought it for this much in 2018. Why am I going to pay it? It's like, dude, well, we're not in 2018. Like, someone bought Amazon for a very cheap price. Like, it's over. This is here we are today. It's forward facing now.
Right.
I think a lot of people are also going through right now I have a plan to buy X amount of buildings every single year for X amount of years, and now they can't find inventory, or
they force it. They change their
that's something else I'm seeing happen every week too.
Yeah, that's a very good one. That's why unit count's such a stupid thing. At networking events, stop asking how many doors you have.
Yeah.
Don't do that. You're putting gasoline on the fire. So Collette, like we can talk about your career for hours, like very successful.
Let's not do that.
No, we won't. Don't worry. But just at some point here, was education always in the back of your mind? Like how were the conversations that ended up where you said, you know what, I'm going to go over to Marshall and I'm going to run the Bennett Institute of Real Estate. Like,
Wow.
What was the impotence of that? And was there always this in the back of your head, like, hey, I'm going to go into the academic sector?
Never, ever, ever have I said that. The idea of joining academia was not on my radar screen ever. When I decided in the end of 2015, the first part of 2016, that it was time for me to make a change, it was pretty much driven by the fact that I felt I needed to do something different than what I was doing. And I realized that my best chance of figuring that out would be to leave PGIM and look outside in the rest of the world. I took a little bit of a gamble on it because I had no plan. It was just, I need something different. Now, with respect to this particular institute, the piece that a lot of people don't realize is that I was a member of the advisory board of the institute way early in its inception. And so I've been in and around the program since probably 2002. So I was familiar with all the moving pieces and the leadership and all of that. So when the founding director in March of 2017, or actually probably, no, it must have been January 2017, decided that he was going to retire, a colleague sent me a notice about that. And I thought it was just because she wanted me to know what was going on, because I wasn't really even interested in this. And when I talked to him about it, because I was concerned that there was something going on, he's like, are you going to interview for this job? Because he knew I hadn't found the next step for me at the time. And I was like, nah, I wasn't really planning on it. He said, you should do it. You really should just interview for it. Just come on in and interview. I did. I walked out of the interview just I was like, so, wow, I think that went relatively well. If they offered me the job, why would I do this? What would be in it for me? And in all honesty, I had an ego problem at the time. I mean, it's like, wow, if I like going to academia, does anybody really care I exist after that? I mean, after having spent the career I've been fortunate enough to have at Prudential, I was like, wow, if I go to academia, I will never talk to most of these people ever again in life, because they won't even care what I'm doing. And oh, wow, can I deal with that? But on the other hand, I was like, I have always had a real keen interest and tried my best to be as involved as I could be around the development of diverse talent for the commercial real estate industry. And I knew that it still was a fight that needed to be managed. I had always felt that the education of future talent was something that was going to be really key to helping that diversity occur. And this particular program has, from its inception, probably been the most diverse real estate program in the country, just by virtue of its location in the middle of the city and the increasing awareness in diverse communities about commercial real estate. So I was like, well, I can do a little bit of everything and be in the front seat instead of doing it off the side of my desk as part of a little project at Prudential or being part of Crew Network or other things I had done. I could do this kind of as a leader of a strategy around this. And I'm like, okay, so, if we can come to terms, I'm going to see if this is going to work. Well, I've now been here 5 years, and it's been an interesting 5 years because I take 2020 and 2021 off the list of having gotten anything done. But it's been 5 years where I think I have helped raise the profile of the importance of diverse talent development for this industry. I've tried to do what I can to help bring awareness of this industry to diverse communities, because that is definitely a hurdle to bringing that talent into the pipeline. And I've tried to work with my industry colleagues around initiatives and efforts to help attract young people to this industry and educate them and get them into the pipeline and get them, internships and into roles and hopefully sticky spots in the industry.
Let's take a step back here because we're talking, we know what you do. We know of the Institute, but take a step back and just kind of give a 101 on what exactly the program is, who's going to it. Is it undergrad? Is it postgrad? Like give us a rundown of who should be looking into this program. Like,
well,
you can sell it right now if you want to.
I want to be all things to all people, to be perfectly honest. So. Okay. The program was initially designed as being a graduate level program. It was a real estate concentration under the MBA. It is currently a Master of Science in Real Estate, along with the real estate concentration under the MBA. So that's our graduate program. We launched an undergraduate major and minor in real estate under the College of Business officially in 2018. First incoming class was spring of 2019. Because I believe that the industry's talent pool will be best filled from the undergraduate world. And so I look at where we can provide value to both our students and to the industry is by providing both education to prepare young people for entry-level roles. So coming through our undergraduate program, either as a junior transfer in or starting out as a freshman and working through this with internships and all that, or as an advancement platform through the graduate program. I do not believe that graduate programs are golden tickets to career changes. So I do try to discourage people who think they want to get a graduate degree in real estate where they've been doing something else for 15 years and they want to make a switch, which has been a not discouraged pathway a lot. Because especially in diverse communities, a lot of people don't learn about this industry until they're an adult. They just run into it somewhere. They know someone who sells real estate, they have a license and they're in the single family space and maybe they do a little commercial and they're like, we got to get that information. Well, you don't go back to undergrad, you go to grad school. Problem is, unless you're going to be an entrepreneur, that grad school model is sometimes not the best educational pathway for you because it doesn't give you that golden ticket to that job at Brookfield or at CB or anywhere else. Because of that question, though, we created 2 graduate certificate programs. So for postgraduate potential students who have an interest in the industry, want to learn more, to either complement what they're doing or to give them a way to just understand what's going on, we have 2 graduate certificates, one in real estate finance and investment and one in real estate development. So you don't have to make the commitment for, 30 credit hours in 2.5 years or 2 years of time and $40,000 worth of tuition. You can get probably some valuable knowledge in those certificate programs. So we do entry level, we do advancement, and we do just information sharing. As we have hopefully a pretty broad spectrum of educational offerings here. We are a pretty diverse program. As a university, Roosevelt is probably 60% people of color, probably 55% female. Our real estate program on the graduate side pretty much mirrors that. Our undergraduate program, not quite, but I'm working on that.
That's awesome. That's great background. Like that was the piece missing to this podcast. So thank you.
Yes.
So over the 5 years, can you pull out 1 or 2 major accomplishments that you'd want to highlight, right? Like big wins of, hey, this has really propelled the program forward.
Wow. They have to kind of say, what do I think are the most important things and most exciting things?
Pick your favorite child.
Done? Yeah. What's my favorite child here?
See, listeners, this isn't scripted. We were throwing her for a loop.
Yeah, they threw me for a loop here. I think that maybe one of the best things I've managed to do is to provide a broader spectrum of educational offerings. I think that is really important. We are not a school that does a lot of online learning. We don't do a lot of remote learning, but I believe that we can provide knowledge in a lot of different ways. So I think the expansion of our academic offerings is a really big success for what we have managed to do since I have been here. Additionally, I think that having the opportunity, because I come at this from having been in industry, to an academic space, I think I bring into the room a lot of relationships and a lot of connections that help our students find opportunities. And that's really important. People know they can call me and go, we've got an internship opportunity, or I'm like, I need an internship opportunity for this student. I think being able to be the bridge between industry and our students is a really big thing for us. And I'm pretty proud of that too.
No, that's life-changing, right? You set the course for someone's life where like they get that shot that they might not have gotten, and who knows how it turns out from there.
Right.
So in along, pulling on that thread, I know like at Drexel, it's tough finding entry level people. Mark, you're always looking at GC. Is this something, if one of our listeners sitting there, they have a small company, are there kids looking for internships? Do you have entry level people? Is this a bridge we've been missing by not having you on the podcast earlier?
Of course, it's a bridge you've been missing. I think that we can help with identifying potential interns for if someone has an internship interest. A lot of small firms don't really have the bandwidth to do internships. And that's because the internships require some real intentional engagement. And if you're a small firm, sometimes you really don't have the bandwidth to do that. But if you do, totally want to talk to you about it. If you think that an internship program is something that your firm might want to launch, would love to chat with you about that too. I've been through the creation of a couple of internship programs and watched how some of those things have gone well and some opportunities that were maybe missed. So happy to chat with people about that. For entry level talent, we have students from around the country. Not everyone wants to stay in Chicago, but a lot of our students
Sure they do.
Well, sometimes if you're from San Diego, you kind of go, I think I want to go back to something warm, especially on a day like today.
All right,
but the idea that there may be opportunities here that may be a great way for them to launch their careers. I think our students would love to be able to engage with firms that have an interest in doing that. We're really lucky that we've got such a great real estate community in Chicago that covers just the entire waterfront of options. We want to be able to help with that. And so to the extent those opportunities are out there, I'd love to chat with people about it and see if we have students who could be good candidates for it. And I also just have to say that, we all know real estate's not rocket science. I mean, it's not easy, but it's not rocket science. So in a college environment like we have at Roosevelt, the Heller College of Business has every major business discipline available. So I'd love to put anybody in the industry in touch with our team around finance and accounting and HR and management and marketing. All of those are all here too. And all of those disciplines play into the industry also. And we have a lot of great undergrads who'll be looking for opportunities. And they may not know that they can do those things in a real estate company. I'm trying to help them understand that, but those roles do exist. And so I'd love to even infuse talent coming from other disciplines into the real estate industry.
That's awesome.
No, that's great. So we will link to all this in the show notes. So Collette, people actually do listen to us. So people might be reaching out to you. You've thrown yourself out there.
That's wonderful. Love to do that.
So, and I think if anyone wants to meet up too, they will do it on your home turf, because I think you guys are just a couple hundred feet from Buckingham Fountain. You're in the heart of it down there.
I overlook Buckingham Fountain, which is closed down now. Boring.
So let's pivot a little bit to just some of the advisory work, specifically CIC, because again, we've had them on multiple times. They're close friends to us. You've been a board member there for a while. What intrigued you about being on CIC's board? And can you tell us a little about what has changed there? What are some of the positive momentums that you can highlight to our listeners?
Well, I was fortunately asked to join the CIC board by Jack Markowski. And I have to say, I was kind of surprised when he asked me, but I think it was because there are a couple of people on his advisory board who I know. And I have always had an interest in affordable housing and, the preservation of neighborhoods in Chicago. Even though Prudential was not a big investor on the neighborhood level, it's always something that has been, I thought, a really important part of the fabric of the city. So given an opportunity to join the advisory board, I'm like, this is great. This is what CIC does. It's about the preservation of neighborhoods. And the way that I could engage in that from having a history in real estate investment, and a keen knowledge or desire to learn more about it, I thought was a great blend. What I love about CIC is that it realizes that as a CDFI and as a provider of capital into neighborhood preservations, it can make a difference. It can help support diverse talent, diverse developers, diverse investors in the neighborhoods where they live, and help them make a difference in their backyards. They also recognize that their resources help protect the strength of our neighborhoods. Someone's got to be in there and understand those dynamics and help people make the best investment decisions to preserve those communities, because that's where people live. And when our city's citizens are not in environments where they have quality housing and quality community development, it tears at the very core of who we are as a city. So I love being a part of that. One of the really exciting things right now is, we got the unsolicited surprise McKinsey Scott money, and we are trying to find a way to do something with it that, maybe we wouldn't have done otherwise. And I think the plan of there's going to be a plan for providing capital for minority developers and investors to help build up that platform of talent, and provide a resource into that platform that, hasn't really always been available. I think that's going to be really great, because the resources CIC can bring around operations and property management and all of that, along with now having some equity to put alongside some of these really talented minority developers, I think it's going to be kind of a game changer. And so I'm really excited to see that starting to come together, and hopefully we'll be ready to launch in early 2023.
That's good stuff there.
Yeah, it's great stuff there.
At the beginning, you mentioned affordability. That's probably one of the biggest issues we have here in Chicago. And listeners, just a quick teaser, we have Commissioner Navarro coming on a few episodes after this, which will be a lot about affordability in the city and how do we tackle this. So let's say Collette becomes mayor for the day, or you become the mayor. You've sold me. I'm sold. You've gotten all our votes. How do you tackle affordability in the city here? Right? It's such a big, complicated issue with so many parties involved. Like, what are some guidelines that you would say to help reel this in and make Chicago more affordable for everyone who lives here, and it is for such a diverse community?
Yeah, affordability is one of those giant balls of just craziness. It's like you pull a string here and something else pops up the other way. The idea of affordability, in my somewhat layman's world, I feel as though it's been given a bad rap. The idea of affordability often brings people to the idea of, subsidized housing, and it's all, low income or whatever. Affordability, when it's lowercase a affordability, is about having housing that is affordable to the people who want it, right? So it can be anything from low to moderate income, maybe even subsidized if that's appropriate, but it can be perceived as a market rate thing. It's just that it's affordable. With the destruction of many of the 2 and 3 and 4 flat properties in many of the neighborhoods, we have lost what has really been the core of kind of affordable housing for our citizens to live in, and replacing them oftentimes with, higher end condos and townhomes and multi-unit properties. Those are expensive to build. It's hard to really do those, as you've seen some of the budgets lately, for less than $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a unit. What is that? That's not affordable. There's got to be a change in the cost structure here somewhere, so that you can actually build quality housing without having it be at the same price point as building luxury. We also have to look at taking advantage of the opportunity to kind of reclaim much of the vacant land that's sitting in many of our neighborhoods, somewhat undeveloped and somewhat not adding any value to those communities at all, and building product that is attainable, affordable, is workforce affordable. I think you can do that with intention and accepting that we can't have everything, to look like, I don't know, any high rise that you see downtown. You can't do that affordably in the neighborhoods. So I think the ADU, I think the additional dwelling unit idea was a great add. I think the allowing for the redevelopment of some, unused maybe garden space in some of the existing, 3 and 4 flat properties is a great first step. I think it's going to take creativity. And I think it's going to take being open-minded about what quality housing is and not getting overwhelmed by scale. These things may have to be, 1 and 2, a single and a double here and there. Not everything has to be a home run, and be intentional and consistent with it. We can't be distracted by, the other shiny object that may be in the room, because affordability, the lack of affordability is keeping people out of our neighborhoods, and keeping people out of our neighborhoods is leading to vacancy and loss of citizens. And we can't do that. We've got to find a way to make living in neighborhoods something people want to do and can afford to do. And then we can have good schools that go with them, because we've got the population and we've got the tax base. All those things feed together. And I think that that's really important.
I don't know if you listen to Tom at all, but he loves those singles and doubles and home run references to baseball when he's talking about deals. So I thought that was funny that you said that. I appreciate that it's a big topic here in the city, and I think we're going to continue to interview people such as yourself, leaders in the city that we can lean on to be that you have the access into the rooms that are making some of these decisions and have those people. So
I don't know if I do. Actually, after what I just said, I may never be invited in again.
I just want to make sure you got the pressure on your shoulders to figure this out for us all, the entire city. So no, I'm joking, but you do. I mean, CIC, they all have a seat at the table in these conversations, and it's going to be a lot of things in the next few years that will be game changers. So I'm excited to see you guys as leaders pull through all this.
There are a lot of folks trying to do some really good stuff. And trying to break the code on how to deliver affordable housing into the neighborhoods. And I think we've got to find the ones who really seem to get it and support them, because that's the pathway. And it is going to be the singles and doubles thing. But a lot of those added up, that'll win a game for you if you just stay at it.
A lot to talk about on affordability. It can be a whole nother conversation. I think one of the most important things you said there was just to support the people who get it and are trying to do it. Right. It takes effort from the developer. Like, they have to be on board, but it also takes effort from everyone else along the line. They can't just be thrown on one person's shoulders.
I agree.
So here you go. So a lot of great stuff to talk about, but Mark, we got to wrap here. Let's get to the questions.
Let's do it. All right. As a leader, what is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do this and accomplish so much while others wish they could?
I think it is a work ethic that was instilled in me by my parents, and the pressure to try to always do the best I can. I'm an only child, so it's like failure is not an option. But I do think I've learned a lot from a lot of great leaders, and I've tried to take on their best traits and their best attributes and use them the best way I could.
All right, so now picture one of your students who's gone through the program. They've come back to you and they're about to buy their first piece of real estate here in Chicago. What is the one piece of advice you would tell them before they buy that first property in Chicago?
Make sure that you have uncovered every potential glitch in how you have underwritten this deal. Look at taxes. Don't just take anybody's word for it. Do it all yourself, and make sure that you can sign off on that information directly.
Love it. Risk mitigation. What do you do for fun?
My husband and I love going to listen to music live. We love the theater. I used to garden when I had one, but now I live in a high rise, so I don't get to do that very much. And I think just kind of, trying to relax and just get together with friends over a good glass of wine and just kind of unload. I find that to be a very important part of my fun list.
What is your favorite music spot in the city?
I don't have one. I've had to, since we've moved into the city, we've had to try to revisit, try to find all the different ones that are around, and we're still working on that. So I don't have a favorite, but I do like Jazz Showcase.
All right. Good stuff. All right. What is a good book, podcast, or self-development activity that you'd recommend to our listeners?
A good podcast. A good friend of mine does one called Fifth Dimensional Leadership. It's a phenomenal podcast. It's just talking about just all the 5 different aspects of being a really good leader. And she has incredible guests, and it's really, really insightful. As far as a good book, I just finished reading The Color of Law. Finally, I've been having this book on my nightstand for like a year, and I finally finished reading it, and it is eye-opening. But it's probably eye-opening because I was willing to have my eyes open. I think there will be people who read it and will not necessarily interpret it the same way. But I thought it was a very balanced view of the kind of legal institutionalizing of structural racism in this country that I thought was really very insightful and very well written. What was the other thing you asked me about?
Self-development activity.
Self-development activity. Wow.
So you could have said gardening, but that's off the table now.
Yeah, I know that's off the table now. Self-development activity. I probably just try my best to read as much as I can so I can have at least perspective from a lot of different sides on a lot of different things. Maybe I'm at that point in my life where I kind of go, I'm probably about as baked as I'm going to be. So what is development here? I think you can always learn how to be a better leader. You can always learn how to do what you do better and different. But I don't think I have really, it's like, I don't like go to a lot of classes or anything like that. So maybe I'm really bad at this.
No, you're doing great. And we will make sure to link to your friend's podcast as well.
Yes, it's great.
All right. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors as a quality resource.
I would say talk to Stacy at CIC. I think Stacy is incredibly well looped in, but she also has incredible, just down-to-earth insights about things. And she has a real keen appreciation and absolute fortitude toward the affordable housing thing and kind of what we need to do for preservation of neighborhoods. So I would definitely put her on my list.
Mark, I was hoping you looked up what episode she was on, but I will we'll put in the show notes for our listeners there.
We got to add the one for Jack and then also the one for Jessica too. In there.
So Collete, thank you so much. You provide a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
You know, I love for people to reach out and say they have an interest in engaging with my students. If they want to help join our advisory board, which is a really key insight pool of resources and professionals that I rely on a lot to make sure I don't miss the important stuff. And there's, supporters of my students. So if you actually want to be a part of this and what we're trying to do at the Marshall Bennett Institute as a student or as a supporter or resource, please reach out. I'd love to chat with you.
That is great. All right. So now we have our Chicago fact. So Mark, who are we playing for here?
Our Chicago fact brought to you by Renovo Financial. Josh Dixon out of Gurnee, who bought a T-shirt, looks like in July. So Josh,
we're just getting around to him. Josh, hope we win this one for you.
Josh, if we get this question right, if myself or Collette get this right, then you get a $50 gift card brought to you by Renovo.
The pressure.
Yeah, so no pressure. So real quick, there's going to be a 1-minute preamble to this question because it's really interesting and I wanted everyone to hear it. And it's funny because Collette, you mentioned diverse talent multiple times when talking about Roosevelt. But here's the story, which I didn't understand. I didn't know this about Roosevelt. So there's this guy, Edward Sparling. He's the former president of Central YMCA College. He wants to start a new college in Chicago in the 40s. So he's getting this college off the ground. Everything's ready to go. The first class is coming in. And the board asks him for demographic data. And he's got a likely suspicion that they want this data so that they can implement a quota system to limit African Americans, Jews, women, and basically make sure it's just a bunch of white dudes. So this guy has the gall to say, no way. They push back. And he actually says, screw you. He goes up and scrounges up funding on his own, takes the 60 faculty members, the 400 students, and starts at Thomas Jefferson College, and where students are admitted regardless of race or religion. FDR dies 2 weeks later. They reach out to Eleanor Roosevelt, say, can we rename this? And that's where Roosevelt University was born, which exactly. I did not know.
Yes.
So very, very fun fact I wanted to share. Now, Mark, your question. When they reached out to Eleanor, they made her, she's on the first advisory board at Roosevelt University. Which other historical figure does Roosevelt claim to have on that initial advisory board? And it's multiple choice. So besides Eleanor Roosevelt, they also had, is it Albert Einstein, Louis Armstrong, Pablo Picasso, or Ernest Hemingway?
Albert Einstein.
Oh, Collette knew it. We got a $50 gift card going to our guy here who bought the t-shirt and gurney.
I would have probably picked him. I'm not just saying that. I probably would have.
He was the more logical of the options. Pablo Picasso might have been a bit of a stretch.
No, and I knew that. I knew it wasn't him.
Yeah.
Well, I threw those two in there. My logic was either Einstein or Hemingway would have been the two guesses, right? Einstein, the connection to FDR, the Jewish connection, and then the Ernest Hemingway, just the Oak Park connection. I thought that might throw you for.
He could have been an answer. That's true.
So, all right, way to nail that. Sorry for the preamble, but I felt I had to share. I'm surprised this guy doesn't have a street named after him.
No, actually, it's a great story that a lot of people don't appreciate. And that social justice piece is a key component of what Roosevelt still stands for today.
That's awesome.
All right. Glad we can tie that all together, guys.
Josh, you win the $50 gift card brought to you by Renovo. But that's awesome. Collette, awesome show. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, you have to, if you go on to our merch store and you buy something, you get entered in this drawing and you can win a gift card brought to you by Renovo as well, too. I think we're going to do something. I don't know what it'll be yet, but we're going to take everyone's names, put it into the bowl and do something crazy cool. I don't know, some Mr. Beast style type stuff. But buy something off there and support the brand and share this with your family and friends and your other real estate investor buddies. So thank you again, Collette. Thank you as always, Tom. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys.